more pilots. We place rule of law, religious persecution in girls, minorities, gender dominates judiciary, a staggering millions of female populace under siege and have been fleeing from violence and intimidation from modern Islamists by extrajudicial killing, targeted violence, including arson, mass arbitrary arrests of opposition activists. Also, I would like to assert something along the lines of local media, the gay, and any journalist dare try shed light on the actual situation or be branded as conspirators and be harassed by weaponized justice system. It is opening remarks. I thank everyone and wish all the best for this site.
Chair, thank you very much for those opening remarks. Now, before we hear from our panelists, I would invite everybody to watch the documentary that's being prepared for this INS.
How Dr. Yunus assured the world and the nation of reform scheme where inclusivity and equality, let alone fundamental human rights, would be upheld. All these tall claims were made during a speech by Yunus on August 8th upon his return to Bangladesh before taking oath as interim head without winning any election. And from UN to other international rights bodies also backed Yunus' regime and the quest for so-called reform process unanimously. International human rights activists, organizations, politicians, lawyers, journalists raised their concern from the very beginning, but Yunus's interim government didn't pay attention to this concern.
Given the current instability in Bangladesh and since the departure of the former Prime Minister in August, this is a moment of deep concern. Many governments are condemning the violence and calling for peace and law and order to be restored.
But 7 months under the rain, a reality check reveals just the opposite scenario, with law and order when totally collapsed, while the judiciary and law enforcement have been totally weaponized. Mob rule has become the rule, with lynching, communal violence, alongside other acts of terror like arson, looting, rape, curb on freedom of movement for women and girls roiled the nation. Let's take a look at how rights abuses exacerbated in the country, extrajudicial killing and custodial death by law enforcement. Since August 5th, at the behest of Bangladesh Army, joint forces have been deployed. Troops are also empowered with magistracy power and following our monthly status of killing under law enforcement. Atrocities against minorities.
We have a responsibility because we enable Bangladesh to be free and independent. Now, whatever the change of government has been in Bangladesh, it cannot be acceptable that religious minorities are persecuted in this way.
Attacks on followers of Sufis and shrines. Islamists inciting violence against minorities, in stark contrast to government's narrative on ruling out communal line over attacks against minorities. BBC journalist laid bare how Islamists, released after August 5th, are inciting ongoing spate of violence, targeting all minority communities including Hindus. 2 episodes in BBC radio service brings to light the stark involvement of Islamists in fomenting attacks against minorities. Yunus's sweeping indemnity for mass killing of cops, citizens, and violent attacks on police stations by loyalists. In contrast to the pledge to ensure justice, an order issued on October 14, 2024 by Yunus reads, "Students and citizens who put forth all efforts to make this uprising successful will not face prosecution, arrest, or harassment for their acts between July 15th and August 8th. Emboldened at the indemnity, advocates of Yunus regime, radical Islamists and coordinators from student against discrimination platforms publicly glorified the killing spree of cops and planned destruction of key public offices as part of a violent campaign to bring down Awami League.
এনায়তপুর থানার পুলিশকে আমরা মেরেছি। আমি সেদিন বলেছিলাম, কেন আপনাদের কাছে যে মেসেজ আছে আমরা পুলিশকে মেরেছি।
যদি মেট্রো রেলে আগুন না দেওয়া হতো, যদি পুলিশদেরকে না মারা হতো, তাহলে বিপ্লবটা এত সহজেই অর্জিত হতো না। কিংবা
পুলিশের ফায়ারিংয়ে কম লাগছে এদেরকে, সিভিলিয়ান ড্রেসে হাতে 7.62 আপনারা নিজেই দেখছেন।
বৈষম্য বিরোধী আন্দোলনে সিরাজগঞ্জের এনায়েতপুরে যদি 15 জন পুলিশ নিহত না হতো, বাংলাদেশের পুলিশের মেরুদণ্ড ভাঙত না।
Despite such public admission of killing, the decree justifying no legal action against violence perpetrated by supporters of Yunus has been likened by rights activists as an act of widespread indemnity granted for perpetrators who killed police, minorities, citizens affiliated with Awami League, aimed to bring Yunus in power and solidify his grip on power. No justice for killing of at least 318 people under Yunus regime. Ayin O Shalish Kendro, a leading human rights organization, reported. Massacre of Awami League activists. At least 171 citizens were reportedly killed in form of lynching, arson, and other forms of violence. According to accounts of family members, tens of thousands of party activists and leaders in almost each unit of 4,573 union in all the 64 districts across the country subjected to physical attacks, and their houses and business were looted and vandalized. Hundreds of activists are feared, killed as their whereabouts are unknown for months. Due to impunity for killing of Awami League leaders and activists, there has been no let-up in the extrajudicial killing spree even after 6 months. Rather, the cycle of vengeance and erosion of rights only compounded. Violence against women. Safety of female population, from clothing to workplace and movement, under siege and culture of impunity reigns supreme. Death of freedom of press. The claim of Dr. Yunus to uphold freedom of press emerged out as biggest hoax in 6 months, as not only journalists are suppressed with meticulous design of false lawsuits, arbitrary arrests, unlawful incarceration, but also a record number of headquarters of media outlets came under attacks. Since August 5th, offices of at least 19 media outlets are torched and vandalized, highest since the country's history, according to DW Bangla Service. Mass arrests and arbitrary detention, brutal crackdown. At least 13,540 people were subjected to mass arrests and arbitrary detention from August 2024 till January 2025. In 20 days of February, at least 12,500 were detained in political cases. No justice in court. Victims of mass arrests denied of legal rights. Reports reveal critics of Yunus regime, who have been subjected to mass arrests, were attacked inside court premises on a regular basis. Denial of academic rights of students. Over the space of last 6 months, tens of thousands of students who are opposed to Yunus and his allies were attacked inside campuses, even barred from attending examinations, denied of academic rights, and their certificates have been cancelled by university authorities. Only because of political belief or alignment with Awami League's student wing, scores of students were murdered, abducted from their home, and even thrown behind the bars. Now the questions over Yunus gaining undue privileges to expand business empire.
Even people in the country would obey. When he went back to his village to protect his father, he started seeing his own eyes. He saw temples getting burned, houses hitting burned, people, women, children being attacked. And so these two, along with their friends, gave up everything, gave up their studies, everything, and they make it their life mission to go and document these atrocities so that the world knows. Because the journalists were doing it, domestic journalists nor international journalists. And the government with abusing vacuum and the Israeli government wanting to show like their controls. They weren't dealing these attacks properly. So I started following them around the country, and I see the next psyches. This house, this was the first village I took with you. This village was enough for me to have seen and witnessed the video chat, terrible word for read about. 17 houses and 3 temples in this village, in this Indian majority village, were burnt clear ground. This is just one of it. 17 houses. In each house, several families lived together. They had started building some of them, but many of them were abandoned. Like this. The family were so terrified to come back that they had just gone and hid away because they feared their lives. Because villagers called Binais that are continuing to get threats. They sent their 17-year-old boy there just to be able to fix their pace up. And then I went to the neighbor's house and half an expert piece. This house was his life's work. He had worked all of his life to be able to make this house. 4 or 5 kids later, little. Even his dinner was overthrown. His medicine was overthrown. He was crying. Was like, what do I do? I have no more money to build this. I don't even have the power or energy. This was my life's work. What do I do? Why did they attack us? And he believes it's because they're Hindus. I went to several different up to 17 houses. And interestingly, not every single one of them were Hindus. 2 of them were Muslim families. But they told me they were attacked after giving shelter to their Hindu neighbors. And I challenged them. It's like, I went there skeptical. I was like, how do you know they attacked me because you shouted at them? That they were telling me, they were like, you were shouting. You shouted the interest, and this is what you better get. We're short on time, so I'm just gonna quickly go through a couple more. Can I see the next please? This is the Eva Baku's temple, you can see. He's praying there. And I also went to several different temples, and they said that they're coming off the people's gods. Because in desperate times, can we have different salads? Very distracted. No. Oh. Actually. Anyway, they told me that they are coming after their gods because in desperate times they tell God, if your gods are attacked, then who do you turn to? Can I see the next home, please? Thank you. This is one of the temple complexes I visited. They had taken the crematorium out of the ground and built every single one of the temples within the complex on fire. You couldn't see anything. They had put graffitis, they had burnt, but they had destroyed it. They had put out of their way the people on the ground floor to send a message. Next one. This village, I went there the night before I got there. A barn had been set on fire. There's some really horrific photos that I'm not able to show you because they're really graphic. People were too scared to even speak to me on the airport because they fear that they had no protection. They called the police, but then the police, but they called the army, but they're short-staffed. They feel like they've been cabal. Next. This wasn't supposed to be here. It's too perfect. Let's test and not on this. That's from next. Yeah. And finally, I'll tell you about, if you can hear about that by my report. This woman is the mother, like many other mothers, of young Bangladeshis who feel like they don't have a place left in Bangladesh and they're trying to escape to neighboring India or other countries. And of course, a lot of them adopted. It's scary. 1 week before I spoke to her, about 10 days, she had lost her 14-year-old son who was so scared of these attacks that he tried to escape. And they fought his body on the border. Now, you can look into why these attacks are happening. It's very complex. I spoke to the police, to the head of one of the heads of the police. He denied any attacks are religiously motivated. I spoke to several Islamic leaders who all seem to want a Taliban sky bull of Bangladesh. And a lot of them have huge followings on social media. And the victims I spoke to say that it's a rhetoric by people like them that is intensifying what they're going through. And people are terrified because of it. Now, meeting victims was so easy. I visited about 9 villages. I spoke to dozens of families who every single one of them scarred in different ways. They lost their family members, they had their houses burned to the ground. It was really easy. You could literally go everywhere. But meeting people who admitted to supporting this attack or at least taking part in it was literally impossible. So I had to get both. And the two young students that I told you took me to a temple complex. It used to be a temple complex. And 3 days before I arrived there, they had attacked that temple complex, burned it to the ground, and made a makeshift mosque on top of it. That was the only place I had a chance of speaking to people who might get support of these attacks. Without me telling you what happened, I'm going to play an audio of when I went to try and speak with them, just to be able to show you the reality on the ground. And I must say, I used to make films. The reason I make this into 2 podcast documentaries is because the subject is so sensitive. People are so scared that it wouldn't have been possible to capture all of those voices in media. Instead, let's focus on what's happening, what they're saying. His bail, or you. That is a result that gave me.
There is also another Cambridgeshire, where a mosque was made by the terrorists. They made a mosque as a Hindu cemetery, yes. And they said the president and secretary not to all this Cambridgeshire. They will kill the president of the surgery.
We arrived in the Moderator, nestled in TACUDU district. Just weeks before, a Hindu crematorium called Orion Central stood right here.
And this cemetery was used by the Igos to burn dead body. But the mystics of this area mainly mosques in the place.
In place of the Hindu crematorium, now stands a small mosque. Its newly built tin roof and brick walls, a stark replacement. Outside, a handful of men linger in conversation. One of them unmistakably dressed as an imam.
I'm going all our security. That's why I want to just these signals like.
To avoid inflaming tensions, we park our car a short distance by taking care to conceal our recording equipment. Barumahi Shafapa and I wait in the car, while our local producer Sakib cautiously approaches the mosque to gauge if the men are willing to talk. So inside of the car, a local producer has stepped outside to speak to the community so that the outside already lots of people came. And they're all very, very angry, emotions are high. So my local producer is calling it all to them. There's a lot of shouting and upstairs inside of the car for our safety. Within minutes, things escalate. From inside the car, watching disbelief as the small group swells into a mob of hundreds. The mood turns menacing. Suddenly, Sakid is being punched and kicked as he scuffles back towards the car. We try to escape, but it's too late. Bricks are jammed under our tires, and our car keys are snatched away. Along with our foot, we're stranded. Trapped, you see frozen inside the car. I'm watching in horror. A few individuals attempt to calm the furious mob, but blooders press forward, pelting the car with bricks and stones, their shouts drifting through the air. Some spit against the windows.
No.
My heart pounds. Death, chilling silence, falls over the crowd. You see a group of men carrying it back. One lug cuts through the madness. Gassing. I think this are quite short, but I'll tell you one thing. 3 hours later, we had sent our coordinates to the authorities. They did come and get us eventually.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite Dr. Rayhan Rashid, who is a human rights lawyer, to address this session.
Distinguished audience, just a few weeks ago, in a quiet village in Bangladesh, a young girl was raped. Her father, seeking justice for his daughter, went to the police. Days later, he was arrested by the very that he had accused of partying the auto-incident. There is this on the record standing by her father's grave. She is not crying, she is simply staring, as if asking, should I now seek justice for what was done to me, or for what was done to my father? These are the impossible questions being asked by young girls in today's Bangladesh. I speak to you as a witness and as a chronicle who has documented Bangladesh relations since office 2024. I speak to you as someone who believes institutions such as these must act when justice is under threat, because inactions carry consequences. Since 8th August, under the leadership of Nobel Peace Laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus, Bangladesh has entered a period of alarming human rights decline. Attacks on religious and ethnic minorities, Hindus, Christians, Sufis, Ahmadiyyas have intensified. Transgender and LGBT communities have faced rising hostility. Political opposition, journalists have been silenced, detained, or forced into hiding. Public space and freedom of expression are shrinking. These are not isolated events. They are part of a wider pattern of intimidation, of impunity, and of fear. Lawyers, judges, and even accused individuals have been attacked, including in 4 cases. The judiciary is increasingly seen as under executive pressure. Trust in the justice system is fake. Mob violence continues, sexual violence skyrocket. Hundreds of convicts, including those charged with terrorism, have been ransacked. Before that, over 450 police stations have been attacked. Weapons looted from these stations are now with extremism groups. While some investigations may be underway, few have resulted in transparent prosecutions. Impunity appears systemic. Yet, Dr. Yunus, the interim government, continues to deny and dismiss these threats. Dr. Yunus himself claimed these are all propaganda, these are all disinformation. But Dr. Yunus is no ordinary political figure. He carries a global image, a Nobel Peace Laureate, a reformer, a man above reproach. At least that's what the world thinks of him. This lens is denials, a weight that obscures the truth. Clearly, moral prestige does not deepen moral equality. We have seen that far. On the other hand, the Office of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights conducted an inquiry, but that has been widely criticized for its flawed methodology, bias, and a form of network capture. It is seen not as a neutral investigation, but as a report shaped by narrow range of voices allied with those in power today. International civil society actors has also fallen short. Some organizations have indeed spoken up, but too late and too little. Many of us reached out in good faith, but we were met with silence. If facts are judged by who delivers them, truth becomes negotiable. So today I made 3 calls. First, that all alleged human rights violations, past and present, be investigated independently and impartial. Second, that the United Nations conduct a full internal review into the OHCHR's query, its process, its findings, and networks of influence. And third, that the United States Congress hold a hearing into allegations of previous U.S. administration's interference in in the ready change of Bangladesh. Distinguished delegates, we have seen this before in Indonesia, Iran, and in Syria too. Let us not add Bangladesh to that list. That gender, standing by their father's grave, is no longer just a victim. She has become a metaphor for today's Bangladesh. Violated, free, unearned, but still standing, still waiting. Let the one buck look away. Let's not fail her. Let the one not fail the people of others. Paper.
Thank you very much. That's Dr. Rayhan Rashid, human rights lawyer. We move now to our next panelist for our remarks, the award-winning investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker, Miss Sahar Zand.
I felt that was really powerful. What he said, I get us frustration and a surge and by for she sit by your vest. I'd very for having been here and the back through for pretending and listening. This is very important and sadly overlooked in the world, everything that's happening. Nevertheless, it's very important that listen people's lives and the future of the human nation is in Asia. So it's important for us to be having these kind of discussions and keeping it alive. As a part of my job, I have traveled to so many countries. I've reported from over 40 countries around the world, including Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Nicaragua, and what I saw happening in Bangladesh is terrible, scarily similar to what I've seen happen in these countries, especially post-revolution. Often in revolutions, people think that the first thing to do is to get rid of the enemy. They unite, they come together. In this instance, for many people, it was Sheikh Hasina. They got Minapa. And now, they didn't seem to think about what happens after. And now, all of these little groups are forming, which is really scary. Now, I went to Bangladesh end of September, early October in 2024, shortly after the outset of Sheikh Hasina's government after the student-led protests. I went there because I was keeping an eye on the news and the whole world was blushing. People, students were protesting, they were getting attacked at the streets and the world was suddenly paying attention. But when the government was ousted and I went there, it was extraordinary. Walking around the streets, I could see graffitis, murals on the walls about the success, about the sacrifices made by so many people who risked their lives. And speaking to activists, to journalists on the ground, they were happy. They called out for the first time in a very long time. They could speak openly without censoring themselves. And it was impossible to miss the hope in people's faces, in people's eyes. You could see that they were hopeful for a better future for their country. So that all of the sacrifices they made wasn't all no. But beneath that curve, something very sinister was shining. Like you couldn't ignore it. It was simmering beneath the surface. Which brings me to why I went to Bangladesh in the first place. After the outset of the Sheikh Hasina's government, loads of videos, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, started flooding social media. First, it was people attacking the houses, the offices of people who work a property locally. People didn't care. They thought they were part of the corruption, they're part of what many people vote for. We don't care. But then we started getting records and videos of normal people, citizens, their houses getting attacked. New York Times was one of the first publishers that actually published a very good report about how these attacks are towards a lot of the minorities, including the Hindus and the LGBT community. But the Hindus is very interesting because attacks against them has kind of been intertwined with Bangladesh's history since the formation of Bangladesh. It's been intensified recently, but after the revolution, both of them were getting attacked, or at least there were reports of it. And then BBC did another report about a teacher having been attacked and so on and so forth. And suddenly the world was like, what is going on? And of course, the outrage in the Hindu majority neighboring India was how. But they started, the far-right Indian media started releasing a lot of footage, a lot of videos that were fake news. So amongst hundreds of actual legitimate attacks that people in the villages, the Adavish, were trusting about who is hacking into them. A lot of videos that were fake, that were irrelevant, that were from years ago started to nudge. And that irresponsible reporting, a lot of the victims I spoke to on the ground in Bangladesh told me, is the reason that the world started doing it. The BBC did a really great investigation into debunking these fake news. But what they failed to acknowledge is that a lot of these reports of these attacks are legitimate. People targeting attack. Yes, there is fake news, but then there's also lots of legitimate ones. But after the BBC's debunking these videos, Al Jazeera fought. And then other publications come. And then the world was like, this is a part of the PJQ's propaganda. We're not paying any attention. As we all know, it's a very complicated party. And that has left many, many people in desperate conditions. I want to start talking about the context. You all know, I'm sure, that there is a lot to read about. I want to talk to you about some of the people I saw and some of the people I spoke to. Can we have the slide if you preface, please? Thank you. These two are two young Hindu students, Varamali and Shrikapa. They're childhood friends, best friends. They grew up in a tiny village. And they were a part of the protest that got rid of the Sheikh Hasina's government. They fought for it. They lost their friends in the revolution. But after these attacks began, first they couldn't want to get, then Alwali's father, the top guy, his father's house was attacked. And that's when it hit me that these attacks are real. Even they were about to set our car on fire. The thing that saved us is out of this mob of about 300, a small portion of them were trying to protect us. I remember I was in the car, they were trying to drag me out, and I was like, do not let it go. Those people saved my life because they knew the car was about to be set on fire. The reason I end up my documentary on this, and I really ask you to go and listen to it, is to show that not everybody in Bangladesh is what's the same thing. There is a huge mob mentality going on right now, but just because the majority are acting, or the people with the loudest voices are acting necessarily the way, doesn't mean they will want the same thing. And it's a very terrifying time. Just because we're not hearing a voice of victims or people at Iran doesn't mean they're not suffering, doesn't mean they're not screaming for help. It's because no one is giving them a platform or they're in silence. So thank you so much for being here, and let's keep an eye out and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sahar Zand, for that very powerful speech. And we now cross over to our keynote speaker, Mr. Bristow.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think might just be helpful to explain why I'm here. So, I'm not here to cast judgment upon any regime in Bangladesh, past or present or future. But when I was Member of Parliament in the UK, obviously my expectation would always be that I was focused on Bangladesh and human rights, to define my colours set of six. But in Spanish, and it's got to be useful is to give my sort of thoughts about what I felt when I left Bangladesh. There are two sides from two faces of Bangladesh. One is good, 6% growth, year after year in recent years. Huge strides in taking people out of poverty. Female education, which is, I think, the best things we can do in the world, but how to relieve suffering. Female education, educating girls. I mean, a child whose mother can read is 50% more likely to live past the age of 5, and twice as likely to go to school themselves. With just one additional school year, a women's earnings can increase by up to 5. I saw that impact, a huge strides taking the education of women. And I also saw kindness in Bangladesh. One of the biggest human rights disasters, biggest refugee camp in the world is in Bangladesh, is in Cox's Bazar, the Rohingya refugee and was biggest refugee alert central Syria was there in Bangladesh, and I've been there since, for a long period of time, 2017, and I've been there myself. I went to see him
a man they took me around his shoulder, showing how proud, very little that he had them, very little that he had. And it's worth noting, yes, for word though, and he is supported by the UNHCR, and without that, they would have lots for outcomes for refugees from the Rohingya community about the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, post-threat Myanmar was a persecuted in Myanmar. But if it wasn't for Bangladesh, those people would be there. There's a lot of talk about, so there's two sides of Bangladesh, and that's the kindness of Bangladesh. The other side, of course, is corruption. The other side is using the law as a political weapon rather than reason or arguments. And of course, human rights abuses. And these aren't new. These didn't all occur just after August the 3rd. But there's a deteriorating security situation, and one has to recognize that. But the questions that I would ask, I've only got a very brief period of time. The questions that I would ask is what happens to the economic growth in Bangladesh that's occurred in recent years. It's the security situation and human rights situation in Bangladesh is what occurred. What happens to the rights of minorities in Bangladesh if the security situation or the rights situation is improving in Bangladesh? And what will happen to those women who will be educated in Bangladesh and progress to be happening in Bangladesh? And the experience girls in Bangladesh. It's a security situation, and the human rights situation is perspective and the security situation to improve. And what happens to the indirectly over a million in Cox's Desire, one of those beautiful paths in Bangladesh, then see what happens to them is under the size it counts, because you are not some perspective in the security situation. So Bangladesh, the country, two sides. Yes, lots of tension, lots of hope. And that hope that was seen by many. Sahar said on August the 5th, a lot of people did see that beacon of hope for what happened on August the 5th. But that beacon of hope also represent that potential growth that I saw and the education of girls and women that saw. What happens to that beacon of hope, a glimmer of light, if the situation in Bangladesh is allowed to get worse and you adults are expect? And that's why this is a core. This is discussion about war. Very much indeed to Istanbul, Bristow, and let's couple with our panelists. Now, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're going to have too much time for question. That's maybe a question or two quickly. If somebody in the room would like to have their hand up, sir, over there, please save a question quickly. I'll get Pam's comment.
Okay, thank you for maybe the opportunity to speak. Currently, situation in Bangladesh is very unstable. Recently, there has been a lot of press or innocent businessmen, human rights activists, journalists being arrested unlawfully. There has been massive increase in underage rape, robbery, and as a British citizen, I feel unsafe and unsecure to travel to my motherland with my family. Law and order at its
Will I feel safe to travel to my motherland again? It needs to be brief, but anybody on the panel would like to answer that question? The thoughts, Sahar?
Comment. I mean, I go there. I didn't particularly get unsafe. I went there. I didn't particularly get unsafe, but I am a foreign national who lived very bad to the country. Something happened to me. And unfortunately, the attention I bought, even though it took about 3 hours and a bit to kill in that pie, was a lot bigger than what many people told me they are receiving. I think it's important to remember that it's not about you visiting the country. The problem that people are actually facing there is so much more extreme than that. And we need to really understand how dire the situation is.
Thank you very much. One very quick question, sir.
And today is the 54th Independence Day anniversary for Bangladesh. On this day, West Pakistani forces, along with their local collaborators, initiated one of the worst possible genocide in this century. My question to the panel is the world are we sleepwalking and doing back 54 years? Thank you.
But last memory, I hope not. Because when I said when I beat Bangladesh, The only thing that I saw was tension. But I'm not ignorant. I know there were two sides. I remember sitting down with the human rights, sitting down the High Commissioner around this, Pat Net, and the issues to human rights. In fact, the situation is deteriorating. There is huge missed opportunities in Bangladesh. There is nothing but potential for that country. It can be a significant play in the future. It's a hold on these national leaders to protect the rights of those who are repressed and to ensure that that potential is realized. And you lift those millions of people helicoptering those cable windows from Nasuroki Uziras. And that's where we need it. And I'm just going to throw to the share to say thank you and to Foes is